Hello everyone! Today we are talking about Unearthed Arcana 5, and we are talking about the survey results and the feedback that we got from that. One of the stars of this UA was, in fact, Weapon Mastery. How did Weapon Mastery score for everyone?
Weapon Mastery scored spectacularly well. Once we went through the feedback, both the satisfaction scores as well as digging into the tons of written feedback that people gave us, we discovered that the survey takers have enthusiastically embraced it. Weapon Mastery itself has reached 80% satisfaction, and all of the mastery properties also are at 80% or higher, with the exception of one, poor Flex,
Oh no!
did not score well. And then Cleve and Nick are both doing really well at 76%. So we have one property, Flex, that's going to
Right.
need some attention. Flex was meant to be the simple option. We wanted to have at least one property for people who just want to increase their damage a bit, and Flex mathematically is actually one of the most powerful of the properties, but we get it. The feedback is, in this new subsystem where we're offering tactical options, people want even a property like Flex to feel like more is going on than just the number went up.
Right.
But overall, so much enthusiasm for what Weapon Mastery does for the game, and it has been so enthusiastically embraced that, as I announced just a few days ago at Gen Con,
Right.
it is going to definitely be in the 2024 version of the Player's Handbook, meaning it's going to revolutionize how 6 of our 12 Player's Handbook classes function, with the opportunity for other classes to also benefit from it through feats, and also, as people are going to see in UA 7 soon,
Which is very nigh.
yes, they're going to see that there are some other ways that classes, or at least one or two classes, will be able to dip their toe into the Weapon Mastery pool. So that was really affirming for us. Anytime we introduce a brand new subsystem, a new way of doing things in the game, we are ready for the response to really be anything. It could be people love it, or people could be giving us a big no thank you. And so for a brand new subsystem that affects as many classes as this one does, to be embraced this enthusiastically
Yeah.
is a very clear message that people are hungry for this, and we are thrilled about that. We're going to continue to refine it between now and the publication of the new Player's Handbook, but I can report Weapon Mastery is here to stay.
Yeah, it's incredibly fun, and it gives anyone who really is super focused on weapons, it gives you kind of like more cinematic feel, and obviously you get a lot more benefits now. So
Yeah. And I simply, as a player, cannot wait to keep using Weapon Mastery. We've become very attached to it simply because we've had so much fun with it in all of our internal D&D games here at Wizards.
we had a few classes involved in this.
Just a few.
Just a few in this particular UA. Let's go with Barbarian. How did people feel about the changes to the Barbarian?
So the Barbarian overall was received well. The Barbarian class itself got 77% satisfaction, with most of the features inside the class receiving a score over 80%. And so if you actually averaged the satisfaction of the features themselves, the Barbarian satisfaction is actually over 80%.
Oh, interesting.
We see that sometimes. There's an interesting thing that because people give their overall score for a class before they give their satisfaction for each of the individual elements, we'll see sometimes that people will actually lowball a little bit, but
Right.
then get into the features and score everything 80% or higher, but they might have said 75% overall satisfaction. So that's a very interesting thing that we then dig into. And we look at both scores, sort of how a person rated the class before they dove in, and then what is the average satisfaction if you look at how all of the features within the class, how those were scored. Now, when it comes to the subclass we provided, Path of the Berserker, oh my goodness, it got 84% satisfaction.
Wow.
Now,
Okay.
the reason why I say oh my goodness
Yeah.
is one of our big goals for this process is to take things that were viewed as unsatisfactory in the
Yeah.
2014 Player's Handbook and make them satisfactory. And here we have a great example of exactly that happening. When we conducted the big 2021 survey on the Player's Handbook, the Berserker got 29% satisfaction.
Thanks.
Let that sink in for a minute.
Yeah.
We just went from 29% satisfaction to 84%, meaning people love how we've reimagined the Berserker. A big piece of that was decoupling the Berserker's key feature from exhaustion,
Right.
and really making you feel like you can lean into this subclass fantasy essentially without being overtaxed for it.
Right.
Even though the Barbarian scored really well across the board, we always view in a case like this that we still have work to do, because in the written feedback, as much as people might have liked something, people always give us really great suggestions. They identify what are for them pain points. So we'll dig into that and keep refining this class so that it will be in the best form it can be in next year. And we have soon more subclasses that we will also send out in Unearthed Arcana for the Barbarian, so people can kick the tires on other aspects of the class.
So moving away from the Barbarian, heading into the Fighter, how was the Fighter received?
The Fighter, like the Barbarian, was received well. The overall score for the class was 75%, but it's interesting. Just like the Barbarian, once people then got in and started scoring the individual features, almost all of them were over 80% satisfaction. So again, there's sometimes this interesting disconnect between, all right, I have this view of the class overall as I'm taking the survey, but then when I actually score each of the individual pieces, if you then average those, often the satisfaction score for the class is higher than how the person scored it up front. We dig into the written feedback to find out, is there a story to listen to there? How can we improve things so that that overall score can go up? But the great news with the Fighter is that almost everything in the class was 80% or higher, and I believe looking at the overall satisfaction for the individual features, we had, let's see, a desire for Weapon Expert and Weapon Adept to be tuned up a bit.
Yeah.
We can absolutely do that. So again, good course ahead of us with the Fighter. And just as we saw in the Barbarian, where there was a big improvement in satisfaction when it comes to subclass, we saw that with the Fighter as well. So we introduced in this Unearthed Arcana a revised version of the Champion.
Right.
And we view the Champion as the sort of perfect starter subclass, not only for the Fighter, but actually one of the best starter subclasses in the game.
Yeah, and a great crit fisher too.
Yes.
So.
And so in the 2021 Player's Handbook survey, the Champion got 54% satisfaction. And again, as a reminder, everyone, we consider a score below 70% to be unsatisfactory. Like we need to get that puppy up.
We've watched many a subclass not survive UA because of that score below 70. Yeah.
And so the good news is the new Champion got 74%. Nice. So it saw a 20% increase in satisfaction.
Do you have to factor in weapon mastery into this as well, because that is so integral to these to the martial classes? So
I think weapon mastery being so well received and being a core feature of the Barbarian and the Fighter are almost certainly a part of the positive view of the classes, because weapon mastery, the feature inside the Fighter, for example, got 80%. So people were like, big thumbs up to this being here. and weapon mastery being a part of the play experience of the champion, I imagine also enhance the view of it. But again, good news there. We see still opportunity for growth in the champion, and so we are digging into the feedback, discerning if there are some enhancements we can make that will both increase satisfaction even more while also maintaining the champion's identity as the straightforward, easy to just pick up and play subclass.
Any other insights specifically into the fighter?
Just that people really love the introduction of weapon mastery, particularly love that the fighter is the best at it.
Yeah.
And that was one of our key design goals when we created this subsystem, is that while we wanted it to enhance multiple classes,
right,
it was our goal to make sure that the fighter was the ultimate master of weapon mastery.
Yeah, I mean specifically, well, the ability you said at one point you can swap out the different abilities, the different effects that these weapons have with other weapons.
And also fighters are able to have more weapon mastery properties unlocked at a time than any other class.
Let's delve into the sorcerer.
So the sorcerer is yet another case where we saw satisfaction improvement. In 2021, the sorcerer had a satisfaction score of 60%. We now, which again we view as being unsatisfactory, this sorcerer got 72%. And so now the sorcerer is moving up into the range we want to see. 72% tells us, all right, we're on a good course, but that also tells us we can improve things even further. When we dig into the individual feedback, we see that there was sort of a mixed response to some of the new sorcerer-specific spells that were debuted in this Unearthed Arcana. But then on the flip side, a lot of excitement for the revised metamagic. The revised metamagic features were all, with two exceptions, enthusiastically embraced. Like, just to give you an idea of how enthusiastically, Careful Spell, for example, had a satisfaction score of 89%.
Wow.
A number of these options, when we have surveyed people about them in the past, have sometimes struggled to get over the 70% line. So the fact that many of these options, I'm looking at the scores, a number of them are at 85% or higher, shows, okay, we're on to something here. Now, the only two that didn't score that high were Seeking Spell at 74%, so that's still a satisfactory score. But then, as expected, people had mixed feelings about the new Twin Spell.
Yeah, of course, because, well, Twin Spell was very good.
Yes, and as you and I discussed in another video, Twin Spell has needed to be redesigned for many years. It simply cost too little for how good it was.
Yeah.
The Twin Spell in this Unearthed Arcana got a 60% score. We view 60% as improvable. It's anything below 60, we usually mean go back to the drawing. It usually means go back to the drawing board.
Right.
Between 60 and 70 means there's something there that we can improve. So we will absolutely work on that. We will also take another look at those sorcerer-specific spells that we introduced, because again, while some people really loved some of them, others got a mixed response.
Right.
And one of the things that became clear in the response to this Unearthed Arcana is really a desire for classes to go back to having their own spell lists.
Right.
So what we're seeing is, even though we have introduced in the last few Unearthed Arcanas some class-specific spells, people miss the 2014 version where this class had a different spell list from that class and that class.
Yeah.
So as a result of what we've been seeing in the playtest results, I can preview for people now that in Unearthed Arcana 7, we will be bringing back the 2014 class spell lists.
Okay.
And that will help address some of the concerns that people have expressed in the playtest feedback about classes potentially losing some of their distinctiveness by sharing those 3 big lists we've been testing: Arcane, Divine, and Primal.
Perfect.
And so stay tuned for that, and people will get to see how that affects the classes in the next Unearthed Arcana.
Let's delve into the Draconic Sorcerer. How was that received?
So Draconic Sorcery got 73% satisfaction, and as we delved into both the scores as well as the written feedback, it became clear to us why, while that is a satisfactory score, why it wasn't as high as we typically see with this subclass. And really it comes down to the fact that, on one hand, people really loved the redesigned Draconic Resilience, Elemental Affinity. Each of those got scores in the mid-80s. What brought the overall subclass score down was the reliance of Dragon Wings on one of the new sorcerer-specific spells,
Right.
and the fact that you no longer had your wings out all the time.
Yeah.
And the main reason why they're not out all the time is because that feature's level was reduced, because in UA 5, we were still using the shared subclass progression that we'd been experimenting with.
Yes.
But as of UA 6, now that we're now in the refinement phase of this process, people know that we have returned to each class having its own subclass progression. So what this means for Draconic Sorcery is that when people next see it, Dragon Wings can go back to being on all the time, because that feature is going to go back up to its higher level.
Right.
So we see the score, it's like, yep, we got it, and the fix is coming, and that fix is just simply, it gets to go back to being what it was before.
So let's talk about one of my favorites. It's the Warlock. We had some significant changes and a lot of feedback as well. So how did that score?
So the Warlock feedback definitely reflected the mixed feelings in the community about the Warlock going in the playtest from pact magic to spell casting.
Right.
You and I talked about in the video that
Yeah.
we knew this was going to generate a lot of conversation
Be divisive.
and bring on some passionate feedback, and it sure did.
Yeah.
And looking at the feedback, it's clear that even though the new spellcasting approach gave the Warlock more spell slots than ever before, and also we know from our internal math also made the Warlock have more reliable output throughout an adventuring day. Despite that, what we found is people are really attached to the distinctiveness of pact magic, of it not being like how other classes cast their spells.
Right. Yeah.
And so because of that, people will see next time the Warlock is in Unearthed Arcana, we will bring pact magic back. It was an interesting experiment, and this is exactly why we do this process, so we can find out how people feel about potential new directions. We also, we experimented with a lot in the Warlock. We experimented with choosing your spellcasting ability based on the pact boon that you select. Yeah. We did tons of Eldritch Invocation revisions. We experimented with Mystic Arcana being, rather than a mainline class feature, instead being an Eldritch Invocation. A whole lot of experiment went on in this playtest version of the Warlock.
Right.
What people are going to see the next time the Warlock appears is many of the class features in the Warlock that were in 2014 will return to their positions in the next Unearthed Arcana version. So Mystic Arcanum is going to go back to being a core feature. Right. People are going to see the return of Pact Magic. But that said, we are still committed to addressing the concern that we were originally addressing with some of the experiments, and that is allowing Warlocks to have access to their spellcasting more often. And so people are going to see in the next version of the Warlock the overall shape being what they're familiar with from 2014, just with some new ways to access that power. Also, the spellcasting ability selection is not going to survive. The Warlock is going to go back to, just like all other classes, having a single ability that is set in the class as their spellcasting ability. Now, when it comes to the Eldritch invocations, there were a lot of thumbs up on how most of those invocations were revised. Some less so. People definitely express their opinions about the hex spell and anything related to it. Definitely want to see that spell feel like it has more oomph.
Yeah.
We hear the feedback and we will make sure it has the oomph that it should. We view this as it was a good test because for us, the main purpose of all of this is we want to know what people think.
Yeah.
And people let us know. and so again, we're going to make sure that we deliver the Warlock that Warlock players desire.
Nice. And that brings us to the Wizard. So the Wizard is a pretty big one as well. How did that score?
So the Wizard actually got a mixed reception, which is fascinating to us because the Wizard is traditionally one of the most popular classes in the game, both in terms of satisfaction, but also in terms of how many people play it. When we look at D&D Beyond and see what characters are people making and playing, the Wizard is almost always in the top 3. Now, the mixed reception that the Wizard got was very clear to us looking at the data why. People love the core machinery of the Wizard.
Yeah.
There was some mixed response to some of the new spells we introduced for the Wizard. But when we dug deeper, what we discovered, the main reason why the Wizard's satisfaction was sitting at just 70%. Although if you average out the satisfaction scores that people gave for all the features, that score is actually closer to about 78 or 79%.
Right.
The heart of it, when we dug into it, was people wanting Wizards to have them go back to having their own spell list. Because many people who love the Wizard love it because the Wizard has traditionally the biggest spell casting, the biggest spell list of any class in the game. And there was a understandable concern that the shared arcane spell list that in this playtest was shared by the Warlock, the Sorcerer, and the Wizard, that a lot of the Wizard's distinctiveness was being toned down, which was not an intention of ours, but absolutely we understand this feedback and is one of the main reasons why people are going to see the return of class-specific lists, because we get it. That truly has been a key piece of the Wizard's identity for a long time, of them having this massive list that no one else has, and we're going to make sure we protect that.
Now we also have a subclass that was included. We have the Evoker.
Yes, the Evoker. The Evoker is a stalwart. We have found throughout 5th edition that anytime the Evoker shows up, people say, "Yep, I see you. Thumbs up." So it's the same again. Some great feedback that we are listening to, and we'll look at fine-tuning some details in there. But when we look at a subclass where everything is scoring 79%, 80%, 80%, 80%. It's like, okay, people dig it. But for us, that's still an opportunity for us to look and see, even when someone loves something, can we nudge it up so it gets even better?
Right. I do have a question. I have a follow-up question on specifically the Warlock. Like, what did you get a sense of in terms of what the Warlock's core identity is? You got a sense of that for the Wizard. What is it for the Warlock? Is it just the weird modular?
Yeah.
It's the odd child of D&D, really.
So it was clear in the Warlock feedback that what people love about the Warlock is exactly its idiosyncrasy, which makes sense because that's what we were striving for a decade ago when we designed the Warlock. We wanted it to feel wonderfully odd.
Yeah.
So there was a concern that by transitioning the Warlock from pack magic to spellcasting that we had unfortunately toned down the oddness.
Yeah.
That was not our intent. Really, our intent was let them cast their spells more often.
Yeah.
But we now have mapped out a way that we can do that while preserving pack magic. But people will have to wait.
Wait until the next one.
Yeah, the next time the Warlock shows up in UA to see that. And then part of all of this is also the modularity you mentioned. The Warlock is one of the most modular classes in the game, thanks to Eldritch Invocations. And that's actually something we're going to lean into a bit harder in the next version. You're going to see even more Eldritch Invocation options than before. I just recently was working on the class, and yeah, the number of Eldritch Invocations in that column, the number went up.
Perfect. I am excited. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who gave the survey results. This is integral to the process of refining all these classes and getting ready for 2024 for all the rule books. So, and also thank you for letting us know what the feedback was and all the scores.
Glad to do it. Always great talking with you. And yeah, thanks to everyone who gives us this invaluable feedback.